Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Development Control. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and if everybody could turn their mobile phones off or to silent, and that includes me. I always forget. For the benefit of the members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I would like to explain who everyone is. My name is Councillor Nick Robinson and I am Chairman of this committee. To my right are councillors who will be making decisions on the applications on this evening's agenda. To my immediate right and left are the officers who will be presenting the applications and providing advice to the committee. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee, not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to keep points made on the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each planning application to a maximum of 4 minutes. This evening there are, I think it's 7 items on the agenda and hope to be finished by 9 o'clock. Thank you. Right, apologies for absence and substitutions. I have apologies from Councillor Frost and I have got Councillor Morrow substituting for Councillor Bowes. Any others? Looks like everybody's here to me. Thank you. Declarations of interest? Any? No. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of December 2022. I'm happy to propose them. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Harvey, I will deal with those at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Applications. First application, land north of the chalet, Newbury Road, Headley. Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an application at land north of the chalet in Newbury in Headley, or Newbury Road, sorry. The site is accessed off the A339 along a private lane, and the proposal is for 15 dwellings, 6 of which are affordable houses. The works also include the access road, landscaping and a balancing pond to the rear of the site. With regard to updates, the members had the benefit of site visit, and reason for refusal 3 has been just formatted just for clarification purposes. The wording has just been put into a bullet point list rather than in a written sentence. So the application is recommended for refusal as per the reasons provided at the beginning of the Planning Officer's report and set out in the committee agenda pack. I'd also like to just draw members' attention to the planning history for the site, which has just appeared on the screen. So across this entire site, there is 3 separate applications. So the blue hatched area is the first application on the site, which was for 9 dwellings. This site was granted planning permission. This site was considered previously development land, and therefore the reason why the houses were granted. The second application is in the green area, which was a PIP for 9 dwellings. This was refused by this committee and also sustained at appeal, where the inspector dismissed the appeal, which highlighted concerns to do with the development not being sympathetic to the character of the area and represented discordant incursion into the countryside. And the current application is the red edge, which also includes the green. So we're going green into the red, which is the application we're considering today. And the officer's recommendation continues the support for the inspector's decision to do with the landscape character, in addition to the other reasons refusal set out in the report. Thank you.
Could I have our first speakers, please, which is Mr. and Mrs. Herson. If you could come forward to the microphones that are over to your right-hand side. No, one behind you. That's it. Thank you. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the microphone button is on the deck in front of you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm going to go through this really quickly. In 1999, the classification of the land, including all of that land that Luke showed on the diagram, and the chalet adjacent to it, was subject to an agricultural tie that was changed from agricultural and forestry to agricultural and equestrian. That was 3 years after an apparent sawmill at the site edged in blue, shown in blue ceased operating. So the land was all agricultural, and there's never been any successful application to change that land status from agricultural. Therefore, it cannot be classed as PDL or brownfield because that's precluded from the definition of agricultural land. The sawmill that apparently operated there as a commercial thing from 1988 to 1996 didn't persist for 10 years or more, so it couldn't override anything with an automatic reclassification either. The planning inspector, in assessing the appeal, concluded that the land shown in red, which was in green at least, which was the subject of what he was examining, was not PDL on site visit. So that's in his report. And if you take a look at the Google Earth map of that time, you'll see that that land is a verdant green. There is no sign of anything that could claim to be log store or demonstrate anything PDL. That was very shortly after the sawmill ceased operating, and that persists to the time that the planning inspector, from the inspectorate, took a look at it again. In 1999, that's when that was shown. Subsequently, in 2017, there was an application for the first 3 houses that was made, and that referenced that land as paddock. So this question of a log store and classification as PDL that's been assumed and presented in a statutory declaration has only conveniently arisen now that the developer is attempting to develop that land. It didn't ever arise before this point. The statutory declaration that was issued and supplied to the council is highly questionable. The only evidence that has been furnished in support of this land being anything other than agricultural. And in an objection that the Colborns made in relation to the 3 houses, they said when they bought the house in 1993 that there was no major activity at the site that's called the sawmill. They've lived at the property for 20 years, have never witnessed 12 to 15 employees at the sawmill, and the most employees we have ever seen have been 2. That's a quote. And they went on to say that no articulated HGV vehicles have ever been seen going in and out of the sawmill, only a standard-sized pickup transit van. Doesn't support the concept of this having to be overflowed with logs into that additional space.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The lane can't sustain the resulting traffic. It's a single lane with no passing points. Currently, it gets occluded by oil tankers, waste collection, deliveries, postal services, etc. Entrance visibility is primarily impacted by the presence of the forge on the corner, making it difficult to turn into the A33 from the A339 northbound into the lane. There have already been 2 serious incidents at that intersection. One had my wife in hospital for 4 days with a suspected broken neck. There are 2 working farms along the lane, meaning that the tractors are in use on the lane, and we are concerned that the vehicles will increase the noise, lighting, and pollution, and that queuing cars will make it difficult for us to get in and out of our property. The council will have to provide school busing to houses that are along there because the local schools are oversubscribed. It's too far to walk to them in any case, and there are no footpaths or lighting in the lane or along many aspects of routes to any of the local schools. This is not a 15-house development. I just want to remind everybody that the Basingstoke Housing SPD identifies that both the 9 and the 15 houses, the 9 current and 15 proposed, should be
Could
treated
you
as one.
wind up now, please?
Sure. So this is going way beyond the neighbourhood plan, the local plan, and anything that the council has proposed, because this is a 24-house development. It's way out of line with anything in the countryside.
Thank you very much. Could you turn the microphone off, please, because it mutes other ones out. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Herson? No? Thank you very much. And if we could have Mr. Leedale, please. Good evening, Mr. Leedale. You will have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the microphone button's in front of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to address the committee. This application seeks planning for a mix of houses, including 6 affordable houses, which are required in Headley. The affordable houses comprise 4 2-bedroom units and 2 3-bedroom units for local people who have expressed a need through the neighbourhood plan process. This will go a long way towards the 10 which are required in Headley. As you will have seen on the site visit, the application site sits immediately adjacent to the development of 9, if I may say, very high quality, highly energy efficient houses within a spacious landscape setting. These are nearing completion, and there are further 4 dwellings for which planning in principle has been granted on adjoining land. There is also planning permission for a dwelling in the Garden of Broadacres. It follows that this locality has been found not to be remote or isolated, and that is why these planning permissions have been granted. Indeed, there are bus services to Newbury and Basingstoke, and a strategic employment allocation at Greenham Business Park is within 15 minutes walk of the application site. The application site sits at a much lower level than the 9 houses which have been built, and in fact it is more than 12 metres lower at the far end of the land. The land is wholly contained by mature trees around the edge, and by any judgment the proposal cannot be said to intrude into the countryside or rural landscape. Rather, it is a pocket of land contained away from the wider landscape. This contrasts with the 9 houses and the other 4 which have been built, and the telecommunications mast, which are very obtrusive. When we applied for planning in principle for 9 houses on part of this application site, we got it completely wrong. It was clear from this committee that there was uncertainty as to the details and a strong objection to the lack of affordable housing. We completely acknowledge this criticism, and in response have provided this detailed application with the 6 affordable houses. These will be very high quality houses, not flats, in a spacious environment to serve local social need, and will match the quality of the open market housing. There will be no tree loss whatsoever, and all the houses are situated at a suitable distance from the root protection areas. There is a large balancing pond with a surface area of 25,000 square feet sited at the lower part of the land, which will accommodate surface water drainage.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The applicant has undertaken no less than 4 biodiversity surveys, and this has concluded that there are no protected species on the application site. The application site has been used for the storage of timber, and there is a sworn statutory declaration, which is a statement of truth, to confirm this. On this basis, the Parish Council has removed their initial objection, and it does constitute previously developed land. The land has no other useful function. I urge this planning committee to grant permission in the wider public interest so that these houses can be provided given the shortfall of 5-year supply, along with the affordable units which I have spoken about. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Leedale? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. There's clearly, from what you've just said and what the objectors have just said and what our officers and the inspector has said, a disagreement over the designation of this land. And I think that's the fundamental point. What is this land designated as? Now, our officers and the inspector is very clear that this is not PDL. It is verdant countryside. It is outside of the original application that was approved. What is your contention? And you say you have a written what? Just be clear about that for us. And what is your argument in contrast to that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The statutory declaration which has been provided is by somebody who's known this site for well over 3 decades, who used to work at the sawmill and has stated that in his time working there, that's the land in blue there, the rest of the land was used to store the raw materials, the logs and trees, which were delivered to the site, awaiting processing at the sawmill. So that is his knowledge, and it's undisputed by any other statutory declaration or information which has come forward.
Any more questions? Sorry, this is questions from the members of the committee, not from members of the public. Thank you. No? Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. Questions to officers. Councillor Harvey, followed by Councillor Rattig.
Could I ask officers, we've clearly got a difference of opinion going on. What is the status that we can and should give to an affidavit and a disagreement that they are stating it's PDL, and obviously you're stating it isn't? Where do we stand in that as councillors?
So, in considering the statutory declaration that was provided, obviously I have provided weight to it. I've taken an approach similar to what we use when we look at lawful development certificates, where we're considering the lawful use of the land. And the planning practice guidance obviously gives us guidance to how we should consider those. And that does talk about, is the applicant's evidence alone sufficiently precise and unambiguous to justify the granting of the certificate on the balance of probability? So it is a balancing exercise. So on one hand, I have a statutory declaration from the former owner or the current owner of the land for the last 30 years. So I've weighed that against the evidence I have as an officer, which is I have an objection from a neighbour who raises concerns about the evidence provided, so they are disputing that. I've reviewed Google Earth images going back since 1999, which gives to me, as I've set out in my report, no clear indication of log storage on the land. I've also had a look at the inspector's decision, which clearly he sets out in his paragraph 10 that he didn't consider the land to be previous development based on his evidence. And also my own site visit. When I attended the site, it was a very verdant green land, although cut up by construction vehicles to a certain extent. But so in the round, I have evidence for and against, and on this occasion, the evidence, in my eyes, casts doubt or reduces the probability of that statutory declaration being the status of the land. So I've considered it not to be PDL.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. I just, it is important that we understand that there are another 4 houses that have got a PIP on it, which will use the lane. Could that be pointed out to the committee? Because obviously some of the objections are about displays coming out and the overdevelopment of the site. So I was wondering if you could point out where Springfield is, because I believe that is a PIP that was passed by officers with no questioning on the lane or the displays.
And obviously what we've got here is a scheme for 15, which it's to do with intensification, and I guess, or my opinion is, and the highway officer, which Hampshire County Council have responded on this and provided a written objection to, is that actually 15 will increase the intensity of that use above and beyond what is acceptable. So whilst they may consider increase of 4 might be acceptable, they certainly don't consider 15, and that's what they've raised in their comments and objections. So it's an intensification issue and that this has gone beyond what is considered acceptable for a private narrow lane.
Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question on highways has been already answered by the officer.
Thank you. I've got a question going on from this. The 4 PIP, was that previously developed land or was that greenfield?
I actually can't remember. I think it probably was greenfield, but I would have to double check what the report said. I can't recall off the top of my head. But we can have a look.
If you can come back to us on that. Councillor Rattigan.
If it may be helpful, it was a back garden of Springfield itself and therefore would be treated as a back garden rather than a greenfield site, I think would be where it would be. But obviously it is grass and it's, Mr Townsend and myself have looked at it as that in the past.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I note that the biodiversity officer and reason for refusal to do with demonstration biodiversity, the applicant just spoke to us, said that they've done 4 biodiversity studies. Can you comment on the inadequacy or whatever? Thank you.
So yeah, our biodiversity officer still raised concerns with the information provided due to, I think there was reference to toads off the top of my head, which wasn't considered. I think the other issue I highlighted is the site is surrounded by trees as identified by Mr Liedau, and a couple of the houses will be going within 5 metres of these. So if there's damage to those trees, are there roosting bats, for example, in those trees, and would we lose those? So there's a couple of issues still outstanding, in my opinion, that need to be covered off, and we don't feel we have that information.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. Can I assume the same situation applies to the objection on the trees in terms of concerns that the trees would be eroded by the development? The applicants actually said they are not building within the route designation zone. So I'm not clear now between this report and what the applicant has said.
Thank you for your question. So this application wasn't provided with any arboricultural information. So I don't know the quality of the trees. I don't know how big their RPAs are. I'm lacking in that information. The PIP that was considered was, so trees were considered under that, but they were reserved until the technical details. So there were concerns raised then. From my calculations, when I did it, I had plot 13 measured 5.6 from the boundary where the trees are, and plot 9 was 5.2 metres from the boundary. I would suggest that's pretty close to trees and tree protection zones, so there could be a risk. So without that information, I can't make a valued or professional judgment on them.
Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. There seems to be an awful lot of information missing, ambiguities here. Is it really sensible to be doing this now, or should we not defer it until we've got a bit more information? Because we don't seem to have all the facts. We've got some people saying one thing and some people, is it sensible to continue with this in your opinion? Or, you know, because we don't have all the information from what I can see.
I would suggest it was sensible to continue, partly because the landscape harm stands up on its own. It's supported by an inspector. We are looking at a site that goes beyond that was dismissed on landscape grounds, so we're doubling the size, or I'm not, you know, don't take that as an exact quote, but it is a massive increase in size. I think it's 8,000 square metres extra of verdant land lost, so I think there's valid reasons there. And I think lack of information is a perfectly reasonable reason for a refusal, and it stands up at appeal, it stands up as a decision. So I think we have solid grounds, and a refusal will, you know, give the opportunity for the applicants to go away, consider it, and they can come back in with a second application where we can consider it.
Thank you.
Did we get anywhere on the answer over the 4 on the PIP? You were looking, what was that PDL or was that Greenfield? So that was the 4 PIP that's approved is Greenfield.
Greenfield, I have past applications for planning permission to redevelopment of this site.
Thank you. Any more questions?
just to be absolutely clear, so we have a PIP with approval on greenfield land, yeah, but on greenfield land. Okay, that's significant in my mind in terms of trying to weigh up the balance here.
If there are no more questions, debate. Councillor Rattigan.
Well, as I brought it to committee, I suppose I better start it off, hadn't I? Obviously, all of us are aware that we did adopt the neighbourhood plan in October on the basis of what was voted on by 93% of the population in Ashford Hill and Headley. And I quote from the thing, many residents are against new homes in the parish expressed strong views on the topic. Well, naturally. They don't want large sites and they were distinctly unpopular. So their view is that brownfield, previously developed land, should be, and small infills should be the way forward for development. I did vote on that, and therefore it had my agreement. And I think the applicant has listened to. I wasn't on the committee at the time, but when the previous application came up for the PIP, there was a sense that it was all being crammed in. I think the extending of the site, and I think Luke has been very honest and generous and said, you know, it's a bigger site, it causes problems, and I totally understand that. But it does allow for more houses to be built and a provision for affordable homes. Now, there is a requirement for 10 within our parish, or my parish, and obviously this would tick the box for 6 of them. Now, whether you can see your way to do that or not, I think it is on balance, because it is most of the reasons are subjective. Is there an intrusion into the countryside? Well, I think most of us who were on that site visit could adequately see that the houses that are currently being built will be much more visible to the wider countryside than the ones that will be sat within the pocket of the possible site for the 15. Now, that doesn't mean that the 15 is right, but it does mean that intrusion into the countryside has already been made. And one of my fellow councillors noted the size of the telephone mast that is currently there, which has got another 30 years on it and will sit there for an extended period of time. So, although, you know, having read all of the reasons behind the refusal, I think the fact that there is a balancing pond at the bottom, there are no species of note on it, and I would have been fine had it been moved for deferral for additional work on the trees and the species, but I think the surface water is already ticked off. I mean, the balancing pond is huge, and is a biodiversity net gain, frankly, on a site there. The 6th reason, the justification on that is a legal agreement. I think we all work towards getting that in time, and I do think that having seen the site, it is cleared of trees, so where the houses are going, we're not affecting it. But also, I think all of us want better land use within this borough, and I think this gives us an opportunity to have better land use. Now, what will this land be in the future? Well, it's not going to be used. It will be a waste for the future, and I don't think that is what was intended by the neighbourhood plan. It is to use best use of land where it's possible within the parish. And all of those reasons, I think, can be overcome. Now, rightly, with 9 more houses going in, and the 4, I know they're not approved yet, but the principle has been given of more houses on Springfield, we have already said that greenfield is acceptable on this site, and more car traffic is also acceptable. Now, you need to balance as a committee whether you think, yeah, we could tick a number of boxes with this development, Or do we go back and ask the applicant to go back and review it? But those houses, everybody who was there the other day would have seen the quality, and it's right that people who are in social housing, and I've already had a note from Kate Randall that there is a need within the parish. Why shouldn't people in social housing get as good a housing as people who buy market housing? I leave that for you to think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Falconer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, those of us on the site visit on Friday, in this regards the highway, it's a miracle that we're all still here.
An ambulance.
An ambulance answering an emergency call came round the bend as we pulled out, and I must admit I shut my eyes thinking, oh dear.
I was at the back.
But we weren't hoping it was going to hit you, Ken. With 15 houses and the excess traffic, the thing that concerns me is it's a single track road, and the way we approached it, we turned left going up the hill, and it's with the extra traffic, will something like a lorry get stranded as it tries to turn into that lane and then have its backside stuck in the road? And the A339 is a horrendously busy road, and I think the Hampshire Highways have pointed to the fact the visibility displays cannot be adequate because of the bend in that road, and therefore with the increased traffic, are we looking at potentially creating a very severe traffic issue with the increasing numbers of houses?
Councillor Harvey.
I think there's an awful lot on both sides of the argument on this one. I welcome the affordable housing outright. That's always a good thing when an applicant comes forward and meets our housing requirement. Never got an argument against that particular perspective. And actually, I was really pleased to hear that it was 2 beds and 3 beds. So we're not getting small units, we're actually getting houses. So that's a massive tick in the box. Yes, there is a highways issue, and the highways issue is clear on the paperwork, and that needs to be overcome. I think there is a more important principal issue, which is the land designated as PDL or is it Greenfield? And we already have a PIP on the books which says we have accepted 4 units on a Greenfield. So from an inspector's perspective, looking at this again in the round, how would you designate the land? Now we've got an affidavit on the one side which our officers have quite rightly in their planning experience weighed up and come down on the conclusion of refusal, and I accept that. The question is, where do we stand on it, and is there more information that we would like to satisfy that particular point? So that's the point of deferral, if there ever is one, is what is the status of the land? Because if that's confirmed, that gives us a benefit of debate about the other technical aspects. And for me, that at the moment remains unanswered. We have very different views, we have different legally acceptable positions, and that has got to be tested, and our officers' view is important to take on board. So if I was going to move for deferral, that would be my reason for deferral, to explore that point and be satisfied on that. But I'd like to hear what the rest of the committee have got to say.
Mike, would you like to come in on that for a sec?
Thank you, Chair. Only if it's, in terms of obviously assisting the committee and hopefully responding to Councillor Harvey's concern, I think there's, I suppose, 2 issues to the previously developed land issue. So one is the evidence, and we've gone through that in terms of what's been presented in the application, how the officers have assessed it and weighed up the evidence for and against. But I think there's a secondary point in terms of what the NPPF definition of previously developed land is and isn't. If I draw members' attention to page 72, 4th paragraph down, that includes the definition of previously developed land, and it effectively says that it will exclude land that was previously developed but where the remains of permanent structure or fixed surface structure are blended into the landscape. So even if there was a position where something previously had been previously developed, if those sort of circumstances are met, it then falls to not be considered as previously developed land. And that's quite useful from the point of view of the appeal decision, because the appeal decision for the 9, for the PIP, for the 9 dwellings, the inspector, just quoting from paragraph 7 of that appeal decision, said, although the appellant has stated that the appeal site was formerly used by the sawmill, no evidence has been provided to substantiate this point. And rightly so, the applicant has taken that on board and has provided further information as part of this application to try and address it. But then the inspector goes on to say, from my site visit, if it had been used in this way, the features which characterise this use would seem to have blended into the landscape. For this reason, the site does not fall within the definition of previously developed land. And I think that's the position that we're still at, which is why our assessment is that it's not previously developed land, even if there was more evidence produced for or against the previous uses.
Anyone else for debate? Councillor Tomlin.
Yes, this is got a number of elements to it. Whether it is or it isn't previously developed land, it's obviously important, but we are seeing so many applications come forward on greenfield land that this is yet just another one. So in some respects, we view this very much as we do the others. But I think the concern I've got is the officer has pointed out that we know nothing about the proximity to trees, there's no information and that sort of thing. And as this is a full application, if we approved it, we would be approving something that could be contrary to all our policies in terms of trees and things like that, which are quite binding policies. So, I'm on the one hand, if we refuse it, come back with all these things done, that's the gamble the applicant takes, or do we defer it on the basis, let's have the information so we can make the decision. So I'm tending to move towards deferral. So I'm quite happy to propose deferral for those reasons and also the Councillor Harvey's reasons, and would put that as a motion for deferral.
Okay, thank you. Mike would like to come in.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Tomlin, again, just to hopefully assist the committee. I mean, obviously deferrals an option always open to you if there is further information required, but I think there are some substantive issues here that you have a position to take on. So the position in terms of landscape impact, I appreciate there are reasons for refusal cited which include lack of information, so in relation to biodiversity, trees, etc. The position in relation to the previously developed land, even with additional evidence, won't fundamentally change because that description I've set out is the position. That is the position that's already been adopted by the inspector. So that there isn't any additional information you can really seek in that sense. The issue in relation to highways, there's a highway objection from Hampshire Highways on highway safety grounds. There would have to be some quite substantive changes, I think, to alter that, because it is about the number of dwellings in addition, as opposed to anything that it sounds like can be overcome easily.
Okay, it's been proposed for deferral by Councillor Tomlin and seconded by Councillor Harvey. Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Chair, if I may just... The issue of the highways statement, which is obviously quite concerning, with regards to the... So it's a question, I'm afraid, to the officer. The PIP has gone through, and obviously the access would have been part of the PIP. So we've got 9 houses versus another 15. I know that's kind of double, but nearly. It's as though we've allowed one and not the other. Anyway, I'll just say that it has gone through as part of the PIP, was the question.
The only thing on that is we've done quite a lot of PIPs, and quite wrongly, access is not a consideration on a PIP. Yeah, so anyway, it has been moved, sorry.
But I'm conscious land use and location are, and that's part of that debate, because we have actually debated PIPs on that basis and decided on land use and location, not specifically access it in technical drawings and technical analysis, but that a site is located appropriately for such.
Hey, Councillor Harvey, yeah, I think to clarify, so the PIP for 4 has been allowed. I think you're right. The actual access would be resolved in terms of access to the site through the TDC. But I think you're right, Councillor Harvey. There would be a consideration of traffic impact in terms of is the location appropriate. I guess the key difference is that was an application for 4. This is an application for 15. So there is a point of scale at which point it becomes unacceptable in terms of the frequency of movements, in particular the access onto the A339 and the use of that and the intensity of that. I think that's the key point that would come into the Hampshire Highways consideration and their objection.
Okay. Been moved and seconded for deferral, and certainly, from my opinion, principle of developing this site, to me, I can't see any harm in principle, but there are an awful lot of things that need to be sorted out, and the access onto the A339 is probably the biggest one of those. I think everything else can relatively easily be mitigated. As Councillor Faulkner said, we were very nearly T-boned by an ambulance on our way out of there. But it's been moved and seconded for deferral. Those in favour of deferral? I'll make that 8. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. I made that 8-4, did you? That is passed for deferral. Luke?
Thank you. I can confirm that was being moved for deferral.
Councillor Tomlin, could you, and possibly Councillor Harvey as well, could you give your precise reasons for that deferral? We should have done that before the vote, but never mind.
Mine were particularly the layout with regards to the trees and the protection zones. That was my point.
And mine is in terms of obviously the PIP in terms of location and land use and the principle set against this in terms of principle and the argument over that, the PDL argument we've been having and the actual evidence that's there. And I want evidence, not just hearsay of this and that and the other. There has to be evidence from both sides in that regard. It can't just be one-sided. There must be evidence for us to consider.
And if I can add mitigation of the access arrangements onto the 339, we're all happy with that? Thank you. Item number 2, land east of Station Road, Oakley. I'll make this clear right from the start. This is a reserved matters application. We are not discussing the principle of development. That was decided at appeal. So if anybody starts talking about principle of development, we will stop the conversation right there. Our first speaker is Mr. Rowley. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, there are 2 members of the public who need to come up first because they're going to be speaking to us in a minute.
Okay. Do we have Mr. Rowley here? If Mr. Rowley, if you could take the speaking chair place and sit there whilst the application is introduced. I'm sorry, Councillor Taylor, I didn't quite understand what you were saying there. Our letter, all yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members.
This item relates to an application which is a reserved matters application for 110 dwellings. I will start with an update. So first update is that the recommendation has changed. Now we received comments from Natural England confirming that the local planning authority habitats regulations assessment is acceptable, and there is no objection from Natural England subject to legal agreement and conditions, which in fact have been already secured at the outline stage when the appeal was allowed. We have received another letter objecting to this application, which raised similar concerns to those raised during the course of the application, and it relates to placement of two-story dwellings in close proximity to existing dwellings and proposed access onto public footpath which runs to the east of the application site. These concerns have been already addressed in the officer's report. Final update relates to the receipt of further amended plans. Further design amendments were originally recommended to be secured with condition 4. This condition is now no longer required. Now we have the amended plans, and obviously condition 1 as a consequence is also amended to reflect the receipt of revised plans. I will now very shortly present the application. So this is the location plan showing the boundary of the application site. Here we have the aerial photograph, again indicating the boundary of the application site. You can see the site, and you can see the existing. You can't see my cursor. How do I do that? How do you get the cursor in? I'm just trying to point their options. Right. Sorry about that, but at least now you can see what I'm pointing at. So this is the existing access road which runs across the application site, and it takes you to the development and Canterbury Gardens, which here is shown in progress, but as you would all know, it's been already completed. Just a few photographs showing the application site. So this is obviously Station Road and the western boundary of the site. You can see the site is fairly flat and is bounded by mature planting, trees and hedges. This is the northern part of the site. This is the Suds Basin, which was provided in relation to the Canterbury Gardens. And this is an application, a photograph showing the northern part of the application site to the north of the existing internal access road. So this is the proposal. This is the proposed site layout plan. You can see here the existing road obviously remains unaltered. What is important here to note is the fact that originally the application proposed to use the internal roads within the Canterbury Garden to access the southern parcels within the application site. However, this has been now amended, so the road remains obviously to provide the access to Canterbury Gardens, but the southern parcels within the application site will be purely accessed through the internal road network within the application site itself. So as you can see, there's a hierarchy of streets, there's a main road leading to the south, and then you have private driveways, more softer roads leading to dwellings. Another site layout plan showing the overall proposal, including obviously the houses, the roads, but also shows the proposed Suds basins, the kickabout area, the village green, and a village park, and then there is another SADS basin within the southern parts of the site. You will also note the extent of footpaths within the application site. They are all connected with each other for leisure walks for the residents, not only of the application site, but also the residents of the Canterbury Gardens. This plan shows the variety of different open spaces within the site, so shows you the community orchard, which has been secured with the legal agreement attached to the outline planning permission. You've got internal green spaces, wildflower meadows, obviously the kickabout area, Central Park, as well as more informal spaces with footpaths. Another slide to show the affordable housing provision. There will be 44 affordable houses, again, as secured with the legal agreement and in line with the policies. And this plan shows the distribution of the affordable housing. So we have some within the northern parcel, but also within the central parts of the site and to the south. It's also worth noting that the affordable houses will be provided within blocks of flats, terraces, as well as there will be detached property, which is also affordable, and semi-detached houses, so a good variety of house types for affordable provision. And I'll just now finish with some elevations to show what the dwellings would look like. A lot of effort has been put to develop the external appearance, so the development complements the conservation area, is appropriate for the rural edge character, and also fits well within the Canterbury Gardens development. So I'll just show a couple of slides. These are the affordable houses types. So here is the terrace, which I mentioned earlier, and this is the proposed block of flats. This is the rear elevation, and the reason why I'm showing this is because this elevation will be most prominent from the main access road. This is an example of detached properties. So again, a variety of properties, bungalows, large 4 or 5 bedroom family houses, as well as a smaller detached units. You will also note the what I mentioned earlier, the effort in terms of design. So there is a lot of attention given to the brick patterns, barge boards, the proportions of the houses, the windows, and the detailing. And these are examples of semi-detached properties, again, showing the different approaches to semi-detached properties. Again, you will note the well-proportioned windows and dwellings and architectural detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arletta. Mr. Rowley, you have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'm speaking as the Chair of the Planning Committee at Oakley and Dean Parish Council this evening. We have submitted 2 detailed responses regarding this application, covering several local concerns, some of which I'll highlight this evening. It is important to establish that this committee refused the prior outline application, and the principle of development was only established through appeal. The reason this is important is because this was not a neighbourhood plan site, therefore wider spatial planning for this area of land has not been undertaken. The outline permission does not negate the need for this to be done, and this should include consultation with the local community. Speculatively, if this had been a proposed site, perhaps the community could have come forward with a neighbourhood development order for the types of homes to be built here. There are important considerations of this site that must be addressed, as opportunities for wider village improvements will be lost if the layout and scale is not appropriate and determined with community involvement. To consider such a large site in isolation, just as a single housing estate, is detrimental to the local area. For example, when considering highway comments, it is important to acknowledge that there is now a complete site at Canterbury Gardens, and there is an application in process for 15 houses on Station Road, the other side of the railway bridge. Although the appeal inspector dismissed most highway comments previously, we believe the highways report from the Parish Council is still extremely valid, especially regarding the safety of users of this bridge. Interestingly, Hampshire County Council Highways appear to agree in their letter regarding the outline application dated 1st of April 2020, reference 631402, and I quote, The introduction of a footpath that will direct residents west onto Station Road where there is no dedicated footway and where the visibility over the bridge is substandard is not acceptable. A Stage 1-2 RSA for the neighbouring S278 works on Station Road identified that the footway abruptly stopping on Station Road would be a problem that may lead to increased conflict collision. So, Hampshire County Council clearly identified that visibility over the bridge is substandard and the negative impact this may have on pedestrians, yet proposes no suitable remediation for the users of this bridge. This route is the most direct route to community facilities north of the railway line, so the tennis courts, beach park, playground and the hall there, and so likely the route most will take. We ask how updated bus stops within Oakley, which is the proposed mitigation, actually address the safety issues for the users of Station Road. Whilst it may be believed this was previously covered fully under the matters of access, I put it to this committee that this should now be addressed under the reserved matters of layout and scale. The reason for this is that the outline application is only for up to 110 homes. It does not state that how many must be built, nor does it cover the size and type of homes to be built, which are all reserved matters. We know from the parking SPD that the size of a home has a direct relationship to the number of parking spaces required, and so it can be inferred the number of permanent vehicle movements on Station Road can be reduced by reducing the number and scale of the properties within the development. This will still comply with the outline application and will be more in keeping with the Neighbourhood Plan Policy 2 regarding the mix of dwellings. We also reached out to the case officer and applicant's representative to have conversations about the opportunity to provide an alternative vehicle route through the new estate to Peterhouse Recreation Ground, but a meeting was not forthcoming.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. We understand this would be classed as a route issue rather than an access issue, and again is well within the reserved matter of layout, which covers routes through the development and their relation to spaces outside the development, in this instance Peterhouse Recreation Ground. Moving on to the orchard and allotments, we do not believe an orchard is suitable for this site, and understand that the landowner and developer are to decide if the allotment provision is covered by either a land or monetary contribution. We need land for allotments. There is a large waiting list of 38. These 110 houses will only add to this waiting list. We request that land be provided in the development for allotments and ownership and management of these be transferred to the Parish Council. We agree with the comments from the design review panel. This application borders a conservation area and should be considerate of this and of a high standard with sustainability at its heart. This is not the case. We also queried the location of a kickabout area next to a drainage basin and the safety issue this may produce. In addition to all of these comments, in the recent communication shared by Councillor Simon Bound, referring to Michael Gove MP's briefing regarding the Level Up and Regeneration Bill, the land supply number should be an advisory starting point and changes in policies are being proposed to place local planning at the heart of the community. We should not ignore emerging changes when discussing this application.
Could I ask you to wind up, please?
Yeah, just one last paragraph. We request that decision on this application is deferred. New documents were added to the portal on the 9th and 10th of January, which is not enough time to review them properly as a consultee. This would also give the applicant more opportunity to engage with the community and the Parish Council, as well as incorporate updated national guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr Rowley? Councillor Harvey, followed by Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just clarify what you are saying about lack of engagement and what you believe Waits and Miller have not done in engagement, just to be absolutely clear?
Yeah, sure. So we sent an email about this application to the representative and the officer at the council, requesting that we be involved in all meetings regarding this application so we can improve it for the benefit of the developed residents. Some particular aspects are in our 10-page detailed report, including community centres and access there, because this is the last place that would be central to the village. And also, there was the aspect I mentioned a minute ago as well.
Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. So in the report, we have a number of points that you've listed as problems you have with this application. Which one do you think is the most important one?
For me, it's the highways issues on Station Road and the impact of these 110 homes. I think the scale, which is a reserved matter, is not appropriate.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. We have our next speakers, which is Mr Salter and Mr Carter. Good evening to you. You have 4 minutes between you. How you split that up is entirely up to you. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Right. Can you hear me? Right. The main thing that we're about is the fact that the lower area running down the right-hand side, the houses, especially the top row, are rather large and higher. The roof rake is very high compared to most houses around the area. And also some of the ones running on the path have windows which will overlook the existing houses in Caithness, Oban and Blue Cedars. The existing pathway that was running from Canterbury Gardens was proposed to come down alongside the existing old pathway at the moment and coming out at the bottom. That was always the proposal, which is fair enough. Also, the existing pathway at the moment, they're trying to breach between the farm, the land itself, and the Caithness Oban close area. That piece of land with the strip of land between, which is barbed wire fenced from that field, my family and all the other people have looked after it for 40 odd years. So there's no way anybody's going to breach that piece of land to do anything with it. We've paid for the trees, we've paid for all the other things over the last 40 years. And so nothing is going to be breached apart on that part at all. So the main thing really is that we feel that the houses are too large and the existing bungalows that were proposed to be built on the other side should be put in that lower field so it doesn't overlook anything at all. This came up at the parish council, everybody agreed with everything. It would look much nicer and nobody would be overlooked if that was the case.
Thank you.
So I think really...
Finished, or have you got anything else either of you wish to add?
Sorry?
You've got quite a bit more time if you want it, or have you?
Well, I think the main thing really is that strip of land where the red line keeps moving as they do it. Every time you get one, the red line that's running along the old existing pathway that runs down to the school, that pathway's always been there. The piece of land, which is about 15 to 20 feet, depending on where you are on it, which is fenced off from the field, which is the land that they're taking over. So that piece of land there with the trees and all the foliage and everything else belongs to us because we've looked after it for all those years. The council did actually say to my next door neighbour in Oban Close some time ago that if he wanted to move the fence back across there, he could do so. And he hasn't done so, but he's umming and ahhing about it basically at the moment. And we've also been in touch with Julian Small over the years, and he was never interested in anything to do with that piece of land, which was the residue left over from where the building developers that built Caithness Close and Oban Close, they went bust and they left that. They weren't going to do anything with that piece of land. They just left it there, and we've looked after it all that time, paid for the trees to be coppiced and everything else. So what we're saying is that there was a proposal for a footpath to come out of that field, the lower one, into the existing footpath just before you come into Caithness. That's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you. If you could turn your microphone off. Questions for the speakers? No. Okay. Yeah, I've got one regarding this area of land that you're saying. Have you ever registered any title to that, or have you given any notification of registering the title, or is it a piece of land you're just now claiming ownership of?
Well, basically, we're claiming the land because of what it is, and that's what happens. Nobody's been interested in looking after that land or paying for the trees to be done and everything else over the years. We've looked after it, we've planted different things in it and tried to keep it as much as possible. There are times when people come along and do stupid things from different parts of the village, but we've mostly kept it up all those years and paid for everything to be done on that. The council has never really been along to do anything with it, and they've not been interested, and they've just left it to us.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I do have email correspondence with Oakley Parish Council going back approximately 5 or 6 years to do with the maintenance of the land, the provision of the trees on the land, the maintenance payments for the land. And ultimately, it's always come down to, it's not Hampshire County Council, it's not Basingstoke District Council, and it's not the Parish Council. So therefore, the expense falls on ourselves to look after the land. So given that, it seems right that we would be taking ownership of the land going forward, as nobody else does. And land does not appear to be registered with Land Registry, as I've checked that previously as well.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No? Thank you very much, gentlemen. And if we could have Mr. Billington, please. Good evening, Mr. Billington. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. As you know, the site benefits from outline planning permission was established the principle of the residential development of the site with 110 homes with access from Station Road. The outline also considered the matter of highway safety outside of the site. This Reserved Matters application now seeks consent for the details of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale in accordance with the principles established by the outline consent. Firstly, I'd like to thank your officers for their assistance during this application process. We have worked with them to make significant improvements to the proposals, resulting in a scheme of a high quality appearance and design that responds and integrates positively with the surrounding context and area. The homes have a traditional appearance of a mixed palette of materials reflecting the local vernacular, including red brick with a mix of flint, render, painted brick and weatherboarding, and a variety of roof materials and designs to create interest and diversity in appearance that is characteristic of the site's surroundings and the wider village. The inclusion of detailing such as brick string courses and plinths, porches and bay windows, and active street frontages adds additional interest in the street scene and further integrates them into the area. The new homes have also been designed to meet national space standards to ensure that the dwellings are appropriately sized to provide a good quality living environment. We have also made sure the design and layout of the properties respects existing properties to the east by retaining existing boundary planting, orientating properties to avoid any back-to-back relationships and incorporating generous separation distances between the new and existing properties. Distances between proposed and existing dwellings are at least 25 metres, which exceeds separation distance requirements to protect residential amenity. The proposals also include 40% affordable housing, located and designed to be indistinguishable from the market housing, as you've seen, in accordance with your adopted policies. 11 new single-storey bungalows are also included, located to provide an appropriate edge to the development, whilst helping meet the needs of the elderly and those with specialist housing needs. The overall mix caters to a wide range of local housing needs and has met with no objection from your housing officer. We have also considered the local community's comments. For example, we have redesigned the road layout to remove any vehicle access from the neighbouring Canterbury Gardens development. The development also provides all new homes with allocated parking and additional parking for visitors in accordance with standards. Overall, the Highways Authority have raised no objection to the proposals. In terms of environmental sustainability, in line with industry best practice, a fabric-first approach to house design is proposed to deliver significant environmental improvements whilst delivering the highest benefits for occupiers and requiring minimal long-term maintenance.
You have 1 minute remaining.
In addition to this, solar PV is also proposed in nearly half of homes, and EV charging points are made available to every home. This results in 15% improvement over building regulations. The proposals also provide a significant level of new public open space for the benefit of the whole community, incorporating a new local area of play, kickabout area, community orchard, and various recreational routes through the development, including new pedestrian connections to Station Road and the Peter Houseman Recreation Ground. A sizable landscape buffer to Station Road is also incorporated to provide a suitable transition to the countryside. The total area of public open space proposed is in excess of 42,500 square metres and includes over 240 new trees, whilst retaining the majority of existing planting. It also results in a significant biodiversity net gain. Overall, the development has an attractive design that successfully responds to the surrounding context, meets all the requirements of the outline permission and your adopted policies, and delivers a good range of family homes to help meet your housing needs alongside new public open space, all whilst promoting sustainability and biodiversity.
If I could ask you to wind up, please.
It is therefore requested that you endorse your officer's recommendation and approve this application today. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr Billington? Councillor McCormick, followed by Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. What use of grey water are you employing in these houses, and approximately how many litres per head water consumption are you looking at with these houses?
You could put the microphone on, please.
Sorry. As a requirement of the need to provide water neutrality, there are restrictions on the amount of water use that each house can have. So off the top of my head, it's around 103 litres per dwelling per day that's restricted to, and that's within the conditions to prevent, as a requirement of Natural England, to prevent excess foul water leaving the site. And to achieve that, things like water butts and things like that will be included with the properties to help reduce that water use, as well as low flow appliances, water appliances, the taps, things like that, to help achieve that requirement and meet Natural England's requirements in terms of nutrient neutrality.
If you could turn your microphone off again. Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Can you just tell me this community orchard, how it will be looked after, how the dead apples or dropped apples and rotting apples will be picked up, and how the trees will be pruned? What's the mechanism that you will employ? Thank you.
So there will, in all likelihood, be a management company appointed to manage the site as a whole, and that will include looking after things like the landscaping, including presumably the community orchard. So one of their responsibilities would obviously to be make sure that it's safe and suitable, and you don't end up with excess apples and things like that.
So if I may just come back there. So what is the idea of the community orchard? Is it for you to go and just look at, or is it for you to go and take the produce? I mean, or do you have to pay for it?
I think it would be for the community to use and take the crop from the apples, and obviously if there is any excess, then presumably the management company would manage that as part of their management responsibilities for the landscaping as a whole.
Councillor Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. One of the other speakers raised the issue that you seem to have put a kickabout area right next to a pond. Now, I happen to agree with them that I don't think that's very safe at all. What measures are you going to undertake to make sure that no one is going to come to any harm?
So it's my understanding that because of the size of the pond, there has to be a certain amount of sort of fencing around the pond because of its design. But one of the things that we've developed as the application is developed is originally the kickabout area was located further to the south in the southern parcel. But through discussions with officers, the preference was to move it into its current location that is proposed, where it's much more central, much more accessible for more members of the community within the development. And we've also designed things like the landscaping to prevent balls and things like that going towards the road and going towards the basin to prevent people potentially being attracted towards that area. But it is a depression in the ground as well. It's not, it's been designed so that it's safe for residents too.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. The parish raised a couple of points that I think just worthy of answering, particularly around engagement and your choice from their statement not to engage with them. So I'd like some clarity on that as to what you did or what you did not and why you didn't. And within that, are you open to a variation of your Section 106 agreement to provide allotments over an orchard such that that could be adopted by the parish council, should that be party taken forward? Would you be open to that? And in that sense of where we stand on nitrate neutrality, obviously you have an offsetting policy related to Bramdown Fields in perpetuity. Who's paying for that? And will that be paid for by somebody else in perpetuity, or will it be the residents who own the properties or eventually own the properties on the site that wind up paying for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If I take each one in turn, so dealing with the first one in terms of the consultation, we did go and meet the parish on 2 occasions during the course of the application. Once on the 12th of May, we presented the proposals to them and offered to answer any questions and listened to some of their comments that were made at the parish meeting. We also attended their parish meeting on the 19th of May last year, where we heard the concerns that obviously a number of residents were at that meeting as well. And in response to that, hearing that discussion, obviously also seeing the comments on the application file from a number of the residents in the parish, we made a number of changes to the application, maybe most significantly that decision to remove the access through Canterbury Gardens to provide access to all of the properties within the site through our own development, if that makes sense. In terms of the, sorry, can you just remind me of your second question?
So in terms of the parish's request for allotments over the orchard, are you open to a variation of your Section 106 agreement to achieve that?
So the current Section 106 allows for the provision of the allotments or the payment of a contribution, and Miller Homes have elected to pay the contribution, which is within their right. There isn't any appetite to provide the allotments on the site, and the contribution is an option that was negotiated at the time of the outline application. So there's no appetite to change that decision at this stage.
So are you saying you're providing a monetary contribution, you would not object to allotments being on the site? You have no interest in delivering them, I get that point, but you would not object to allotments being delivered, therefore you would be open to a variation of the Section 106 to actually facilitate that?
I can't answer that because I'm representing the client, but I think that clearly it would need to be something that the parish would need to take forward and discuss separately with Miller before they could entertain that proposition. So in terms of the water neutrality, there's an agreement to provide offsetting land, and my understanding is that there's a separate commercial agreement between Miller and that landowner to pay a certain sum to that landowner that would cover the cost of that mitigation. And that's not something I understand that would be funded by the residents in the future. It's a sort of one-off payment that's paid up front.
Councillor Tomlin, second question.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, that's been asked. It's about the allotment provision. Thank you.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. One of the previous speakers spoke about concerns regarding the location of buildings and some overlooking others on the Caithness area. What flexibility is there in your layout, if anything?
Thank you, Councillor. So, as I mentioned when I gave my deputation, the layout has been designed to provide a suitable distance between the properties on the existing properties to the east. So the normal sort of rule of thumb for back-to-back distances, which there aren't any back-to-back distances between the two, the existing properties, and that is around 21 metres, and we're in excess of that in all locations along the eastern boundary, and indeed the distance is further than between the separation distance between that was approved and now built on Canterbury Gardens and the existing properties. So we actually exceed the distances between the properties to the east and within our proposed development. we've worked closely with officers to make sure that relationship is acceptable. So I think we're happy that the relationship is acceptable. We've retained that that existing tree belt, and I think, you know, we'd be reluctant to change the layout any further because we think the existing relationship is acceptable.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Billington. Councillor Taylor. Good evening, Councillor Taylor. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much. Let me reassure you, first of all, Chair, that I do fully understand the principle it's going to be built on. It's established. But I do also want to say that you are absolutely right. You did the right thing when you refused this at outline stage. And I also want to say it's a tragedy that this has been forced through appeal. The recent report commissioned to look into appeal cases will not explain how gruelling some of these hearings can be. And the recommendation for approval in this case was mercilessly exploited at the appeal hearing, which was conducted on Zoom. The barrister, QC acting for the developers, aimed to belittle our witnesses in the absence of officers and was called out as a bully by our council's legal representative, who was from the same chambers. And I personally was insulted and had no way I could come back on it. You need to know this because it is important. This was as a result of this decision. And here's the point, and it's at the heart of my objections now. Just prior to the hearing, Hampshire changed their tune, as you've heard, and decided suddenly to raise no objection on highways grounds, with little explanation for that turnabout. And all I can say is, and I quote, HCC raised no objections to the proposal, subject to financial contributions for highway improvement works. How wrong does that sound? Because most of those so-called highways improvements will be done in other places in and around the village and will have virtually no impact on the safety around this site. For example, projects quoted include dropped curbs in the distant Croft Road. That's the road where I live, and that would be a complete waste of money. Enhanced bus shelters in another part of the village. That is unbelievable. It's not taking seriously the very real impact on safety that the development will bring about, which you've heard from the council about. And it's already being shown by the impact of that smaller estate on our country roads. So our main fighting weapon at appeal was completely disabled. Our highways witness ended up simply agreeing with everything the opposition said. What a waste of his fee, and we were left high and dry. So my objections today. First of all, I agree with all that the parish council and the residents have said, and I would like bungalows closest to the village near Caithness Close. That makes absolute sense, and I see no reason why the applicants shouldn't increase the number of bungalows in view of local need and of lessening the impact on existing houses. I mean, I would say if you are mindful to approve, could officers at least advise that if a condition can be included, which will allow the residents around the contentious area to maintain the trees and bushes along the edge of that footpath.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Secondly, I'm sure it's not actually allowed to object on highway safety grounds. I assume that ship sailed with the appalling appeal hearing. But I would like to register my forlorn objection because the safety and ambience of Oakley's country lanes on this side of the village will be destroyed by this development. At the very least, I would ask that the monies to be handed over to highways, which resulted in their announcement that they had no objections, are used to more direct purpose in making the roads here safe. So please, would you seek advice on that? I don't know if you have this feeling as well, and I know you've already deferred once, but this proposal just doesn't quite seem oven-ready to me. We've got the safety of the kickabouts, we've got the allotment question, the S106 possibly being changed, the housing distribution, we've got road safety, which is absolutely key, and the issue of footpath 9B and the screening there. So if you would be mindful to defer, these are things that we can talk with the developers, not just with the officers, but with parish councillors and borough councillors as well, so that we can get the best possible development here in this essential part of Oakley. The minute we say yes to this, those houses are going to go up like a dose of salts.
Can I ask you to wind up,
Thank you.
please?
I've finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Taylor? Councillor Tomlin.
Good evening. Did you get involved in the 106 agreement at all at any stage as a ward member?
No, I haven't been involved in that at all.
No more questions? Councillor McCormick.
Yeah, it's been mentioned that there's a play area in there. Do you have a preferred location if there was a play area in this proposed development?
Thank you, Councillor. I haven't looked at it in that much detail. I mean, I haven't been concentrating on the Kickabout area, if I'm honest. It's a concern for the parish council and others, and I'm very grateful that Councillor Freeman raised it. But my major concern is that we do something about road safety before something happens. Thank you.
No more hands up? Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Questions to officers? Councillor McCormack, followed by Councillor.
It's mentioned on page 106, the community orchard is not something required in the area. Well, my estate, or Councillor Freeman's estate for that matter, would quite like a community orchard. Would there be any possibility of transferring the community orchard to another area if this application goes ahead?
I think the answer is no, Councillor, as part of this application.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, we have a, I would imagine, quite significant 278 spend going to Hampshire. I imagine Hampshire have set in motion their ideas of what they want that money spent on. So I get that bit. What scope do we have, and I imagine it's only going to be an informative, to talk to Hampshire about the very real concerns raised by the parish and the county and the councillor and Councillor Taylor about how that money is actually spent to achieve the end required, which is safer roads in the vicinity of the development, not further afield, if, as described, those changes aren't going to be of material consequence.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I think the issue, as you say, is correct in that the position on the 106 is already there from the appeal, so that monies is already accounted for and allocated for, if you like. In terms of having any more influence, I mean, ultimately, if there was a change of approach in terms of the highway mitigation that the inspector found acceptable, I appreciate isn't accepted in some instances locally, that would require deed of variation, and that would need to be something that would be taken up with Hampshire directly. So there isn't really even an informative position I don't think we could put on the application in this instance, because it is something that's already set. I think it's something that would have to be taken offline outside of the actual consideration of the application.
So forgive me, you're saying not even an informative of this committee's opinion, given the section 106 has been agreed at appeal, and I'm looking at the developer here to say, are you open to having a conversation if you want this thing to go through positively with the community? And I would genuinely encourage you to do so, really would. But the informative would be, wouldn't it better for us to express an opinion if we had one that county could listen to?
I think in that instance, I think no, it's because I think I understand the issue you're raising now. So I think the only informative or type of wording of informative you could put on, because as you appreciate, it's not a conditional 106 issue, would be to express to the applicant the desire for them to consider exploring with Hampshire alternative provision, but being very clear that it is a voluntary thing. There's absolutely no requirement for that. It's simply expressing the view of the committee that that's something that they explore further.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I do have two questions, so if I may start with the first one. So, page 141 in the report, there's a section, middle paragraph. It's all about the potential options the applicants offering to put photovoltaic cells on the building and fabric first measures for the materials used for energy conservation. It says the relevant conditions imposed on the outline permission secure the implementation of these features. So I ask the question now, do we reinforce that with a continuation of this condition in the actual delivery of this reserve matters? How does that mechanism work?
Thank you, Councillor. I would like to take you to the appeal decision itself and list of conditions. So in condition 7, the inspector specified the various sustainability design measures, and that included the opportunities for renewable and low carbon energy technologies, the use of passive solar design, etc., etc. At the end of this condition, the inspector said the development shall be carried out in accordance with the statement. So this condition not only requires the submission of this information, but also ensures that this will be incorporated within the design.
And question number 2 was page 121. It was in the consultee's comments. We've got design review panel. So my question is, who are they, and how much clout do they have in this application? Because they actually say that this development and the design of the dwellings was noted by the panel to have low aspirations that do not reference the conservation area. Therefore, the overall character of the development appears to be a standard development that lacks ambition to provide sustainable and attractive dwellings that relate to their setting in the adjacent conservation area. It's quite a damning thing. So who are they, and what weight should we give that? Thank you.
Thank you. So the design review panel is a panel made of local architects, planners, urban designers, and relevant specialists. They mainly work for local councils in the area, so they were local experts. I think what's most important to note is that this review took place when the application was first submitted. So they looked at the very first proposal, and as a result of this review and their comments, the design of the proposal has been substantially altered. So you just mentioned the reference to the conservation area. So these comments actually helped us officers in negotiation with the applicant to secure better design of the dwellings, to incorporate more solar panels on site, and provide more information on what will be incorporated within the proposed development in terms of sustainable energy.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. Can we be clear as to what the current status of this hedge that is being maintained by residents, please? Do you have any information?
If I take you to the location plan or the site layout plan, right, I'll just make it a little bit bigger. So, as I mentioned in my presentation very briefly, there is already a public footpath which runs along this boundary here, and this public footpath is owned by Hampshire County Council. And as a part of this development at Canterbury Gardens, the applicant had to pay a financial contribution towards resurfacing of the footpath here. And as far as I'm aware, that contribution has been made. So what this application is now proposing is to create access points onto the footpath itself, but this will only be within the red line. So this is not going to go beyond the, oh, it's not showing, sorry, I just realized this is not showing now. So it's here. This is where the footpath runs, the existing footpath, public footpath, owned by Hampshire County Council. And like I say, the connections are here and here. But these connections will only be created up to the actual footpath within the applicant's land ownership. The connections are not going to go any further. They're not going to go into the footpath here, which takes you to Caithness Close. So it's going to just literally connect onto the existing public footpath, which, like I say, is owned by the Hampshire County Council.
Councillor Court.
Can I just ask a supplementary on that? We're talking about an existing hedge, which is, by the looks of things, very old indeed. The footpath is overgrown, as I saw it. Now, the residents have said they've been maintaining this because nobody else would or was interested. So who is responsible for maintaining that hedge, or who owns it?
The hedge, obviously, which is shown within the red line, is owned by the applicant. In terms of who is responsible for maintaining, obviously, the land within the applicant's ownership is the applicant will be responsible for maintenance of that land. What happens at the land which is adjacent, from obviously what I understand, the land adjacent to the connections is owned by Hampshire County Council, and that is the public footpath. So Hampshire County Council is responsible for maintenance of the footpath. So if the footpath is overgrown, it's up to them to actually maintain the connection and access through the footpath.
May I try once more? It's not the footpath I'm interested in. Obviously, it has to be kept clear. It's the hedge itself. Who is responsible for that hedge?
It's the landowner on which the hedge grows.
Okay, many thanks.
Any more questions for the officers? Councillor McCormack.
Craving your indulgence, Chair. Councillor Tomlin piqued my interest on his reference to the design review panel on page 121, and looking through the reasons for approval, it says that it complies with CN9 and EM10, but it strikes me that looking at CN9, how are the community needs being met if the design review panel, for instance, say there's insufficient footpath and cycle provision on site? And the other thing, in terms of solar gain, no gas boilers, well insulated, well designed buildings, water consumption, how does that comply with EM10, when I get the distinct impression that there's lots of people in this room who think the scheme should be aiming for a higher standard?
Like I said before, these comments were made based on the very first submission of this application, on the very first proposal. Since then, we obviously have received amended plans as well as further information, and I would like to refer you to the report and the relevant page 141, which exactly explains the applicant's position. That includes the position on gas boilers. This was obviously questioned by officers, and the applicant has confirmed that yes, gas boilers will be used across the site, but they will be highly efficient individual condensing gas boilers, which are optimal method for supplying the homeowners with efficient and cost-effective space heating and hot water. So these are not just any boilers, they are very efficient boilers, which as a consequence score the applicant points on sustainability measures as well.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to our letter's point, I think that's key. It's that the design panel's comments were on the original submission. The application has evolved, amendments have come in, further comments have been made, and I draw members' attention to how they have then been considered by other consultees. So the final response from the urban designer confirming no objection, the same from the landscape officer, the same from Hampshire Highway, etc. So all of those things that have been raised have been taken into account, considered by those consultees, with no objection being raised, which forms part of our assessment of the overall application and why, in our view, it's acceptable form of development.
Any more questions? No? In that case, we move to debate. What I'd like to make clear before we do, there are obviously things that we would all like to see different. We'd like to see the road in a different place. We'd like to see the kickabout area in a different place. Our job is not to redesign this to make it acceptable. Our job is to decide whether what is before us now is acceptable or not. And that's a black and white decision. We're not into the business of saying, well, if you did this and if you did that. We've got a proposal before us. It's a yes or a no on whether it's acceptable. Anyway, debate. Councillor Harvey, thank you.
Go on, I'll go first. I get, and I can hear Councillor Taylor's frustration and the parish's frustration, and I get it, and I'm there. But you read the report, and Hampshire have sold the pass on this one. I mean, if anyone can have any anger with Hampshire County Council for shifting its ground in the way they've done, then I respect that and I understand that. That doesn't change the fact, does it? And isn't it the case that we've now got an appeal inspector's decision that's given outline planning permission, and we've now got a reserved matters in front of us for what it is? So we've got to judge it exactly as the chair says. I think the two things that stand out in my mind as issues that need to be resolved, in particular, that can only be resolved through informatives, unfortunately, is around the 278 and the 106 relating to Hampshire County Council and its responsibility on highways. And rather than them sitting in a nice office in Winchester giving us a desktop exercise of what they think they'd like to spend the money on their nice little lists, let's have a proper conversation, if possible, between the developer, the councillor, in terms of all three borough councillors or whoever the representative is, and the parish. Let's have a conversation. If the developer has an open mind and is willing to use their financial contribution to work with county, if our teams can work with county and persuade them, then we should seek to do so. Because road safety is obviously something that we're all concerned about, but I respect that ship has sailed. Thanks very much to Hampshire County Council itself. In regard to the Section 106 variation on the allotments, and again, it's the developer's gift here to do the variation, if they're putting up the money, then great, let that money be spent on something the community actually want, which would be a set of allotments. And if they're willing to take on the allotments in the way was described by the parish, you would take on the responsibility for that. You're taking on the financial responsibility for that in some sense of transfer. Then again, that variation could be looked into, and we should have an informative on the application that does that. Again, it's that notion of how do you make something acceptable when clearly the principle isn't, but the principle's been sold, and there's things around the edges we can do, and those are two immediate things I can think of from the debate we've had thus far to try and help, at least on those 2 points, because I can't see any other way through. What is in front of us meets the policy requirements, and as a reserved matters application is therefore acceptable. And I don't want to do this, but I recognise it and would move approval on the basis of that with those two informatives, because I can't see any other way out of that situation.
Thank you. It's been moved for approval. Is there a seconder? Yeah, with those informatives. Is there a seconder? Councillor Falconer, thank you. Anybody else like to speak on it? Councillor McCormack.
Well, I'm going to vote against, and I want my objection recorded on that, because I think we should be aiming higher in terms of looking to the future. Having energy efficient gas boilers at this stage, when we're looking at not having any new gas boilers in less than 7 years' time, you know, we should be ahead of the curve on this, and we should be having developers coming forward with more innovative solutions. And the fact that their peer group has said that in this report, to me, speaks volumes. And the fact that we are saying, I accept that we can't decide on things like access that have already been decided in the outline planning permission, and that was decided over our heads at appeal, and there's all sorts of comments about that mentioned tonight about how they felt that process went. But we still have policies that we could use, community needs, cycle provision, pedestrian provision, some levers that we could pull on Hampshire County Council to have a safer approach to highways access. I mean, years ago, we would never have passed a scheme of 110 houses coming off a single track country lane. We'd have built a two-way road. And there's numerous examples of that all over Basingstoke town, in the outer parts of the town, round by Hatch Warren, etc., where single track lanes have not been used. They've had bigger roads or widened roads, new roads put in. So whereas I think I know where this might be going now that we've got a motion on the floor, I do feel that I have to record my objection to this, because I don't want to see schemes like this coming forward with such obvious concerns raised about road safety and us passing them.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, in terms of the certainly in relation to the road safety issue, as I say, that part has gone, as already discussed, in terms of the outline application. But I note the comments from Councillor Harvey in terms of the way the motion has been put forward with the two informatives which are noted. In relation to renewable energy efficiency, etc., there aren't any specific policies in terms of setting any higher standards at this stage, as members will be aware from previous discussions on this in relation to the current local plan, and the application does provide what it was required to from the outline planning permission in terms of the conditions imposed at that time.
Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, just following up on Mike's point there, I think we've all got frustrations on just about everything on every application, but I think it's dangerous to stray into areas where we feel we should redefine our policies and the local plan within this committee, as opposed to it has to go through the due process, and we have to consider things as they are, even though technology may have changed and offer current opportunities, because I think that would lead us wide open to a challenge.
Thank you. I think, if my memory serves me rightly, it was me that proposed the outline application for refusal. I was certainly supportive of refusing that. But unfortunately, that boat has sailed, and I look at what we've got in front of us, and there's an awful lot of things I don't like about it, as have been mentioned. But look at it in terms of planning law. Do I see sufficient reason to refuse it because we would like the bungalows somewhere else, or we would like this, the kickabout area? Is that sufficient to refuse it? And no, I don't think there is. I think if we refuse this and it goes to appeal, we will lose. We will lose at appeal. So anyway, it's been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I make that 8. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. That is approved, our letter, subject to the informatives, our letter.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application is approved subject to conditions listed in the report and informatives in relation to the transport contributions and communication with Hampshire County Council, as well as the community orchard.
Thank you, our letter. Thank you, everybody. Paul.
Can I ask officers, how do we capture what Councillor Taylor raised, which is what Hampshire County Council did? Now, we've done the application, I get that, but I don't want to leave that, and I don't know how we capture Hampshire County Council being such a bloody poor partner in the context of what they've done on this, and I don't want that to go without having us. I don't know what to do, but I can't leave it.
I don't think we can do that at this committee. I agree with you entirely, and I personally would be happy to have be party to that meeting, because we have been let down by Hampshire County Council, but that's not a decision for tonight or a discussion for tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, and I think it would be appropriate if we had a 5-minute break, or let's make it back at 8:30. Thank you. Right, if everybody's back, could we get going? I don't see any point in delaying it any further. Thank you, Ron. Right. Number 3, land at 52 Pardown, Oakley, Basingstoke, and Bethan.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application at land at 52 Pardown. The application is for 2 dwellings to be served by an existing access. There are a few updates, one which relates to an error on page 182 of the agenda, referring to the site being owned by 52 when it is actually owned by the applicants. And 2 additional comments have been received, noting no developments within 200 foot of 52 and additional comments from number 46 relating to privacy and overshadowing. So the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethan. And if we could have our first speaker, Mr. Rowley again. Good evening once again. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. As we have stated, I am the Chair of the Planning Committee at Oakland Parish Council. The Parish Council reviewed this application in December 2021 and voted to object to the application for the following reasons. There was a concern about setting a precedent for backland development along Pardown, which is the street at the front of the development. Individually, each potential application would have less of an impact on highways, but taken as a whole could cause safety issues. Application site is outside the settlement boundary. The planning history shows Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council refused previous applications 3 times. BDB 40125 for a detached bungalow, BDB 4221 for a house and garage, and BDB 24168 for 2 houses. These refusals contain material considerations that are still relevant today and apply to this application. After reading through the committee report for this evening, the Parish Council would like to respond with the following. The lack of the 5-year land supply does not mean policies can be ignored, even though less weight is given to them. And as noted in the committee report, 2 properties is not a notable contribution to this issue and would have very limited economic, social and environmental benefits. I also refer to my previously mentioned communication shared by Councillor Simon Bound, referring to Michael Gold's MP briefing. The land supply numbers should be an advisory starting point, and changes in policies are being proposed to place local planning at the heart of the community. As I said, the site is outside the settlement boundary and is in a countryside designated area where the intention is to maintain open nature and not to build. There is no local need for big family homes. The Oakland Dean Neighbourhood Plan identifies in paragraph 5.2 a larger need for smaller dwellings. The Neighbourhood Plan consultation showed a clear shortfall for smaller 2-3 bedroom properties and of suitable housing to enable older occupants of the village who wish to downsize. There is also a new estate planned on Station Road, which we've just discussed, which has now been approved, and this includes larger family size homes. This application is not supported by the local plan or the emerging local plan. As discussed at previous EPHC meetings, the policy SS5 in the emerging plan allocates 0 houses to Oakley. The Parish Council have concern about the TPO protected oak tree at the bottom of the driveway. We understand that protective fencing will be put up, but will it be enough to protect the tree from heavy duty construction traffic, and is the driveway suitable for such traffic? There is also a query regarding the parking standards applied to this application, as the application should be classed as rural as stated in the parking SPD, not outer urban, which does affect the number, we believe. In our opinion, the adverse impacts of this development do demonstrate enough of a significant impact to outweigh any proposed benefits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Rowley? No? Thank you very much. And if we could have Mr. Hannay and Mr. Hall, please. Good evening. If you could tell us whether you're Mr. Hannay or Mr. Hall, and then you have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening. I'm Mr. Hannay. Mr. Hall is here, but given the 4 minutes, we agreed that I would speak both on Mr. Hall's behalf and the immediate neighbours and many of the other objectors, of which there are many. Thank you, committee, for this opportunity. I realise it's a graveyard shift, so I'll keep things concise, to the point, and related to planning. Key points I want to raise. Your own committee report for this evening highlights that this development does not meet the local plan, and it doesn't contribute significantly to local housing need. I think the second point is that therefore this application is based on the NPPF and the presumption in favour of sustained development. Now that says the benefits have to outweigh the impacts. It's the view of myself and fellow residents that it doesn't, and that the report in particular doesn't cover those to a sufficient extent. So, addressing those points, in terms of loss of amenity, there's the additional comment from the residents of 46. If you look at the site plan, then actually the way these houses are proposed to be sited will cut light to number 46, which is the grey building immediately to the right of the development site there. In particular, their conservatory, which will be overshadowed from winter sun, and also those houses occupy an elevated position above number 46 and will therefore have line of sight onto their patio and conservatory with a significant reduction in privacy as well as the sunlight impacts. The other point I want to make, Pardown is a narrow, unlit, poorly maintained single-track lane. It is a main route for pedestrians, horse riders and cyclists out into the country. It's also a route used to walk to school by children, including my own, including after dark. The speed limit is 30, that is regularly exceeded by particularly delivery drivers. The proposed houses have 8 parking slots, so we can expect quite a lot of extra movement along that lane and also along the driveway, which is narrow, has no parking spaces and a closed gate at the end of it. So I think there is a concern over road safety here, a personal one for me with my children walking along there. And if we look at Pardown, that's a great picture. What you see there is a single ribbon of houses running out into the countryside. That is unique in Oakley. It's the reason that we moved there. All of those houses, including my own, have large gardens. There's been no backland development there for about 30 years. Well, we've already talked about the planning precedents for that. If that is allowed, we'll see applications for this up and down the road. In fact, there's already another application going through the process at the end of Oakley. So in terms of whether this will materially impact the character of the road, it might not taken purely in isolation. But if you look at the National Planning Policy Framework, the presumption
You have
in favour
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. So the presumption in favour of sustainable development says you should promote a sustainable pattern of development. Further backland development along Oakley is not a sustainable pattern of development. It also says that to use that presumption, you should be looking at things that cannot be met within neighbouring areas. We've had a very long debate, and quite a high quality one, about the other areas immediately around which will meet this exact same housing need. I think the other point is the adverse impacts shouldn't outweigh the benefits. The report doesn't state many benefits. It talks about nutrient neutrality, with calculations based on 2.4 people for 4-bedroom houses with 8 spaces. It also talks about sustainability, but those are the only benefits listed in that report, compared to the loss of amenity for the village, the loss of amenity for the immediate neighbours at 46 Pardown, the potential for road safety, and the destruction of character of the area if this sets a precedent for further back-down development.
Could I ask you to wind up, please?
So I think the absence of the 5-year plan is the reason why this is being considered. I don't believe, looking at it, that the benefits can outweigh the negative impacts for those who live in the area. And that is my main point, and I'd like to thank the committee for considering this and listening. Thank you.
Thank you. If we turn the microphone off, it would be helpful. If you just wait there, there might be some questions. Questions for the speaker? No, there aren't. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, your time has expired. If we could have Ms. Lees, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Sorry, before we do start, could we clarify who the other
You can.
person?
I was just about to say, my apologies. Yes, hi, I'm Ginny Lees. I'm one of the applicants.
And the person next to you?
Is
the architect for moral support.
Okay, thank you. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for giving us the time to speak today about our application. Our family has lived in Oakley since 1968, several of those years at 52 Pardown. The land where we would like to self-build has been owned by our family for almost half a century. Our application, neither opportunistic nor speculative, is born from a long-held dream. As youngsters, we went to local schools, were involved in local clubs, and our own daughters have done the same. As a family, we have always contributed positively to village life. My sister and I started working on our application in early 2021, seeking guidance from experts in self-built homes. We wanted our self-built homes to be sustainable, providing low cost, clean energy, beautiful in design, and practical for living. Our submission to the LPA delivered all those critical elements. This is supported by their recommendation for approval. From the beginning of this lengthy process, which is sometimes very difficult, we have worked in a friendly and very positive manner with the case officer, ensuring that any amendments requested were completed efficiently and any queries answered. We improved our application by taking into consideration residents' comments and updated our reports where consultees have requested us to do so. All technical consultees are happy with our application and have raised no objections. All conditions required by the LPA, if our application is approved, are wholeheartedly accepted by us. All comments from the residents have also been addressed in the report, but I would like to say that we have taken into consideration as much as we can the change we have on them. We made significant efforts with the residents, offering to discuss our plans and listen to their concerns. We spoke to residents in May 2021, advising them of our intent. We wrote to them twice, asking them to share their concerns with us. Apart from a query about the beech tree, we were met with silence. We were aware that the greatest change would be to the residents at 46, and we made particular effort with them, offering to share and discuss our plans, listen to any objections they might have so that we could take them on board and address them as much as possible. The offer was declined, but in the absence of any discussions with them, we were adamant that our designs must protect their privacy and any changes for them were minimal. This has been beautifully achieved by our architect and through guidance from our planning consultant. The parish council object to our application on the basis that it might encourage other property owners in Pardown with large gardens to get the same idea. But our application is different, it's unique, all applications need to be judged on their own merits and against current policy. This is a unique situation. It's not someone's garden, it's our land, retained for the very purpose and the reason for us being here today. 2 homes, each built in a 1/4 acre plot, cannot be considered small for Pardown or anywhere else in Oakley. Infill and backland development has taken place throughout the village in suitable locations such as this, and including Pardown itself, over the last 40 years.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Anyone that has lived Anyone that has lived in the area during this time, like us, will be hard pushed to say the village has been spoiled as a result. Our self-built homes will only enhance the area, not damage it. We have worked incredibly hard, very patiently and very professionally to deliver a plan that meets the exacting standards demanded by the LPA. We have strong connections with this village and have wonderful friends and neighbours. Oakley is a beautiful place to live and a place where we would love to continue living. By building these 2 homes, we released 2 properties for sale, enabling other families to enjoy all the delights that Oakley has to offer. In conclusion, thank you again for taking the time to listen to me. Thank you especially to the case officer for recognising the overwhelming merits of our application, and respectfully we ask the application be approved in accordance with these recommendations.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Morrow.
It's about the overshadowing of the house next to the application. If that plan is north facing, usually it's only the south the sun passes through.
So we do need the microphone on because there are people watching on the...
My question is just if it is coming around the south side, if that is the south side as the plan is, I don't actually see how it would overshadow. But
we agree. It won't overshadow number 44.
South facing though, is it?
I think we can sort that out in questions to officers, can't we? Okay. Any more questions for the speaker? Councillor Court.
Can you please clarify your intentions towards the existing oak tree and the beech trees?
They all have TPOs on them. They all have TPOs, and our submission has a very thorough tree protection plan, and there are conditions within our application where we're expected to have a specialist monitor what we do, and we are wholeheartedly accept all those conditions.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sorry, people at the back, you are not entitled to speak at this point. All public speaking. No, I'm sorry, you are not entitled to speak. Thank you. Any more questions for the Speaker? Councillor Freeman.
The other residents have raised issues, concerns about safety, road safety for pedestrians and children on the school route. How are you planning to mitigate that so that everybody that is using the area is still safe?
Understood. So firstly, look at me. I'm getting older. I'm approaching retirement. I work from home. My husband works from home. My sister works from home. We are a small family. The intention for one of those houses was for my sister and my mother. We lost our mother last year, and my family are all grown up, and we hope that we have grandchildren in the not too distant future that can enjoy Oakley as much as we do.
Thank you. No more hands up? Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor. Good evening once again, Councillor Taylor. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't automatically resist backland development, but it has to be in the right place where minimal harm is caused. I just want to explain about Pardown. It's a very special road in the village. It's in the most rural part of the village of Oakley, and it's outside the settlement policy boundary, so it's in the countryside. And it's a ribbon of houses, most of them on good-sized plots, that trails to the southernmost tip of the village, culminating in open fields and copses. In fact, if the bus had gone on further, it would have been nice. You could have seen why it's so popular with walkers, because it's open countryside just beyond it. This plot of land that in consideration is also a considerable way down the road to the south, away from the village, and close to the meeting place of another track that goes again into open fields, and also Fuzzy Drove, which goes through farmland right to Kempshot. So it's used a lot by dog walkers and hikers. And Pardown is particularly peaceful and rural, especially this particular end of the lane. Now, you'll know very well policy EM1, I'm sure, which requires that development must not be detrimental, amongst other things, to the surrounding setting, local character, and sense of tranquility and remoteness. Extra homes inserted behind existing houses in this particular part of Oakley would be detrimental to this. Similarly, policy EM10 of the local plan requires new development to positively contribute, among other things, to local distinctiveness, the sense of place, and the local character of the area. So the character and distinctiveness of this unique road will be diminished by infill developments, increasing the housing density, increasing traffic, and the general busyness of the area. And whilst I do appreciate that maybe the first occupants of these houses won't be very busy or noisy, you don't know who's going to own that house in the future. And we have to take it on that. And please also don't dismiss the precedent argument by simply saying that each application is taken on its own merits. Backland development changes the nature of a road. Every time a development is allowed, there's a step in changing the street scene, in changing the character and the general ambience of the locality. And it will be this changed character that is then the yardstick for any future backland developments. And if this goes ahead, there will be more. So I'm asking you to spare Oakley from yet more unwanted development. We're seeing Oakley's status as a country village being incrementally eroded, and this would be another step in that direction. And finally, I'm sure you'll appreciate that at present, with double Oakley's local plan housing allocation already either built or in the pipeline. Local need really isn't a credible argument for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor Taylor? No. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. It's Craig, in your indulgence. So you mentioned Fuzzy Drove, and there's like a 5-way crossroads around it. How close is the house to that?
It's very near. It's just...
Can we have the microphone, please?
So sorry. It's just a couple of houses down from 1, 2, 3 roads. One goes to Sandfoyne Lane, the other goes to Open Countryside, and opposite goes across Fuzzy Drove to Kempshott. So a matter of metres. Oh, you can see it. You can see it there.
Any more questions? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Questions to officers. Councillor Morrow, would you like to start with your orientation question?
Yeah, just could you clear up which way the site's facing?
Yeah, so this is the north layout here. So if we go back to the, so north is this way. So it's actually
It's on the right.
Yeah. So towards number 46 is north facing. But we have done a full assessment on overshadowing on page 176 of the report, and we've done a further update in the update paper as well, and considered that the spacing, the direction of shade towards the end of the garden in the morning hours, and the distance and the size of their garden is enough to mitigate that impact. And because we have no 5-year housing land supply, the impact has to be significantly and demonstrably harmful to warrant refusal of the application. So the balance is tilted in favour of this application.
I'll just say then that obviously what I said before was wrong. So it is coming round and causing a shading issue. Just so I withdraw that.
Any more questions for officers? No? Debate. If there's Councillor Morrow, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where it's down to our local plan and having to put weight to it. There's a lot of reasons why we could refuse this, and the only reason not to is because of the position we're in my opinion. So, you know, I'm minded to refuse with hope that we've still got some control.
Yeah. Are you moving for refusal? Could you clarify?
Just debating.
Okay, just debate. Anybody else like to contribute? Councillor McCormack, followed by Councillor Freeman.
I guess it's a degree of reluctance that I'd have to move the recommendation, because I don't see any reasons in planning law that we might refuse this.
Thank you. And Councillor Freeman?
Again, it's quite a difficult one, this is. I mean, there is no real planning reasons, but, you know, it could be argued that it changes the nature and is therefore contrary to some of our policies. But again, it's very difficult to find. It doesn't look like it would impact the houses that adversely. My main concern would be around the increased traffic and the fact that there are a lot of walkers, and whether it's going to be safe for them with additional traffic. If you've got dogs, if you've got horse riders, if you've got walkers there on a regular basis using around there, we need to make sure they're safe as well as with this development. So yeah, it's quite difficult, this one.
It's been moved for approval. Is there a seconder? In which case we need to have a vote on it, so I will second it. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against? 3. Thank you. That is approved. Officer to confirm, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is approved subject to the conditions listed on pages 184 and 191 of the agenda. Thank you.
Right, item number 4, buildings at Bishop's Hill, Etchingswell Road, Kingsclere. And Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. So the fourth item before you this evening is for buildings at Bishop's Hill, Etchingswell Road, Kingsclere. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the erection of 1 4-bed bungalow and associated works following demolition of redundant buildings. So if I take members' attention to the update paper, this site was not subject to the viewing that took place last Friday. But also within the update paper, an updated site plan was received on the 20th of the 12th, 2022, to reflect the buildings that are required to be kept in situ for ecological reasons, which means that condition number 1 and condition number 26 have been updated just to show the updated plan. So there is no change to the overall recommendation, and the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions as set out in the agenda before you and within the update paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jessica. If we could have our speakers, Ms Downey and Kenton Judson, please. Good evening to you both. You have 4 minutes between you, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair, and members. Thank you for your time this evening. This application at Bishop's Hill is fully supported by officers, as is outlined in the report that you have before you. I'm aware that you haven't been to site, but as you can see from the photographs, there are a number of redundant buildings on the site that have been used for general storage, thank you, over the years. The application before you is for a single-storey, 4-bedroom dwelling. The applicant has worked alongside the council, amending the scheme to ensure that officers and consultees are in support of the application. In doing so, the scheme has been reduced in height, bulk and mass, and given a more agricultural feel to reflect the historic land use. I believe the building relates to its context in a sympathetic manner. Houses and other built form are integral to the A&B landscape character. The buildings have been used for general storage by the applicant and their family for over 35 years, and so the site constitutes previous developed land. The officer has supported the application, and the new development will improve the site and remove dilapidated buildings. We presented the initial scheme, which was for a much larger building, to the parish council and took on board their comments, and as well as a few local objections to the initial scheme, which we have addressed these with the revised scheme that you have before you this evening. But we'd like to point out a few inaccuracies for consideration this evening in order for members' clarity in terms of the objections. There are no public rights of way over the site. There is one nearby, but the site is shielded by trees and vegetation. The biodiversity report has formed part of this proposal, and there is a substantial net gain that is conditioned as part of this application. The neighbouring property is at some distance from the proposed development, and so there is no overshadowing or overlooking. The site is not isolated and is within walking distance of the local amenities in Kingsclere. All of these are supported in the officer's report. As you're aware, there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development when paragraph 11D is engaged. Due to the current lack of 5-year housing land supply in the borough, this application has been considered in relation to this paragraph of NPPF for guidance. It is our opinion that the site has previously developed land and, as outlined in our planning statement, will comply with local plan policy SS6A. Given the application has 6 reasons for approval, we ask you to support the officers and approve the application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions for the speakers? Councillor Rattigan.
Can I ask about the impact on the AONB? Because I believe it's on the edge of the AONB. Can you just see what are the views going to be on to the property?
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. I think the main thing is that the initial scheme was further up the hill. This scheme brings it down below the ridge, so from the AONB component, it's on the edge of the AONB. But if you're looking from, say, Watership Down and looking down across that vale, this will be basically lower than be effectively just lower than the existing structures that are further up the hill. So that was part of our mitigation with the redesign.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. There are no other speakers, so questions to officers. Councillor Tomley.
Thank you, Chair. Page 235, I think it actually comes up on there. It's the site cross-section. And there's, that top drawing there. Could you tell me what the text says, please? Because I cannot read it in my document, and I can't read it up there. And page 237, for that matter, please.
Sorry. So the first text with the arrow pointing down is outline of the original application, which was for a larger dwelling.
Okay.
It's been revised since. Then the second line is in regard to the height of the existing buildings, which are on there. And then the third line down is the height of the proposed dwelling. So it's a comparison between.
Is that the same on page 237? Just a repeat drawing?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions for officers? No? Debate? Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor Rattigan.
Looking at the plans, they don't seem to really have any more visual impact than the existing buildings, which appear to be rather run down. I don't see a problem with this at all.
Councillor Rattigan.
Surprisingly, nobody's asked me to have a look at this, so I came in with a completely clear thought process on it. And to be honest with you, normally intrusions into the AONB would not really be totally acceptable, but this is the first time I've seen a 4-bedroom bungalow come forward. And it is right that we provide larger housing in a bungalow form. Normally there are 2 bedrooms, but this is a better use of land, and I think we all agree if we use land properly, we won't have to build across more green fields. So genuinely, I'm quite happy with the officer's reasons for approval, and I'd be happy to recommend or second the recommendation in motion. Thank you.
I don't think it's actually been proposed for approval, so. I'll take Councillor Freeman as proposing it and Councillor Tomlin as seconding it. Thank you. Nobody else seems. No, anybody else want to speak on it? I certainly don't. Okay, moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? And that's everybody. Thank you. That is approved. And
Thank
Jessica.
you, Chair. To confirm, the application has been approved, subject to the conditions and informatives in the officer's report. Thank you.
Right, number 5, Bel Air Grange, Hackwood Lane, Cliddesden. And Jessica, once again.
Thank you, Chair. So the 5th item before you this evening is for Bel Air Grange, 14C Hackwood Lane, Cliddesden. The proposal seeks retrospective planning permission for the demolition of an existing barn and the erection of a replacement barn. So there are no updates in regards to this application, and the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If we could have our first speakers, which is Mr. and Mrs. Prabdale. Good evening, Mr. Prabdale. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Yeah, press the button and the red light will come on if you get the right button. That's it.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. So I'm here representing both myself and my wife. We are the immediate neighbors of this property. The first challenge is that the original barn could not be seen from our property because it was only 3 meters tall. This one's north of 5 meters and can be seen from many vantage points of our property. The applicant does claim that the footprint of this property is actually smaller than the old barn, but it is significantly taller when you consider the volume. And there is already an existing massive barn on the property considering the number of animals kept. So this barn actually does represent a house. It's got the very same shape of a barn conversion. I'm concerned that it may become a barn conversion in the future. And the number of barns in this space are incredibly dense. Also, I'd like to bring to the attention of the council that the applicant had no intention of making an application, that this was only brought to BDBC when it was made aware to them by your processes. And then only where it was a series, not just one, but a series of retrospective applications lodged, not 1, but 5. So the behavior of ignoring the entire planning process and not even lodging after the fact for 5 different developments. So this is an oil tank, a septic tank, a summer house, a garage, and this barn is effectively 2,000 square feet of unplanned development that would have gone unnoticed by BDBC, right? Also, it's got very poor design. The original barn was brick and wood. This is actually ironclad. I did not see any biodiversity survey present, and we don't understand the loss of ecological habitat. I didn't believe that there was any regard for the old building. I do know the previous owners of that site who had reported bats and owls in their previous barn, the large one that still is in existence. I've also got something else to share with you, that when the barn was actually put up, again without planning permission, I had power knocked out for 5 hours because they put the foundations directly over my main run of power from Southern Electric. And when SSC contacted me, they spent 5 hours trying to determine whether it was on my side or on their side. The applicants took no reflection on this. Since then, there's been over 15 power failures at my property. SEC claimed that the repair underneath this barn has caused reflections, which is why they took such a long time to repair and remediate it during the recent storms. What I'd like to also conclude is that within the same acreage of the same postcode, the parish council, several councillors have been very strong in their position of planning. In fact, I myself have had a small shed rejected by this very council on the very same piece of land.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. And I just ask that this group apply the very same consistent approach and treat all these matters equally. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions for the speaker? No? Thank you, Mr. Prabdale. And if we could have Mr. Raggett, Ms. Pasley and Ms. Ralph. And if you could introduce yourselves, you have 4 minutes between you, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Normally, I think it's the right-hand button, and it'll light up red.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lucy Ralph, and I'm a director of a rural planning consultancy and I'm agent for the application. In addition to the planning officer's introduction, I would like to explain some background in relation to the purposes of this retrospective application. The land outside of the main property curtilage was lawfully permitted as equestrian land during 2016. At the time, there were 2 large barns associated with the site, one 5 metres longer than the other. The longer barn measured 12 metres by 27 metres and was 3 metres high, with a floor space of 324 square metres. It was over 50 years old and was in a dangerous state of disrepair. The external walls had significant cracks and the low-grade stills were beyond reasonable repair. The asbestos roof and wall panels were falling in because of the failure of the main structure. Although it provided limited trailer and hay storage at one end initially, this area became beyond repair in later years. Therefore, the barn would need to be knocked down and rebuilt to be of full use to the applicants. The old barn was positioned approximately 5 metres from the other existing barn to the west, and this barn remains in use today and is at some 8 metres in height, and it largely obscures views into the site from neighbouring properties. Both barns, being located close together, to the south and rear of the main dwelling, were quite imposing and disproportionate to the layout. As the barn was in a state of disrepair and had no use in its current state to the applicants, they decided it should be replaced. The old barn was demolished and a new one erected in April 2021. For better machinery access to the yard areas and paddocks beyond, and for adequate machinery access for hay and machinery storage, it was moved further south, still within the existing developed yard area opposite the stables. Positioned inside the southeastern corner of the existing yard area next to the paddock, it is not in a prominent position and is heavily bounded by trees and hedges. Such a large replacement barn was not necessary for the storage requirements in relation to the use and size of the site. The new barn is a typical agricultural style building and has a footprint of 126 square metres, 198 square metres less than the original barn. The height of the new barn is 5 metres to the ridge, 2 metres higher than the one it replaced. The additional height allows access for modern machinery and storage which would have been much smaller when the existing barn was built some 50 years ago. The new position, smaller size, dark green cladding materials, existing screening, including that provided by the much taller existing large building, means that the replacement barn is well screened from the wider views into the site. It has no more impact on the setting as a whole than the larger barn it replaced. The replacement barn is in the same use as the previous, and there are no highways or transport impacts. Both national and local planning policies generally support replacements of buildings in the countryside which are in the same use.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Your planning officer has visited the site and has taken into consideration any impact on landscape, visual characteristics of the area, quality of development, effect on the amenities of neighbouring properties and highways. As outlined in her report, the replacement barn does not cause harm to any of these considerations enough to outweigh reasons for approval. There are representations of support from neighbouring villagers who consider the proposal is in general good design, is an improvement to the area, is suitable for the site, and is well screened and blends in with the surroundings. Most of the objection letters received include comments from outside the village. They are not directly related to the application before you and are irrelevant for the purposes of it. The old barn was not of any architectural design merit worthy of retention. The new barn and materials creates a modern agricultural style building which is not out of place in such a rural setting. It provides for the necessary storage of hay, machinery and equipment in relation to the existing use of the site, which the old barn eventually did not. It has an appropriate use connected to a rural site. Therefore, I ask you to support your officer's recommendation for approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions to the Speaker? Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Before you demolished the old barn, did you take care to check for things like bats or owls? And did you take into consideration the effect it might have on the wildlife population around the old barn?
We've only owned the property for 7 years, so I can't comment on what was there before. But to my knowledge, I've never seen any bats or owls. If it had been a need for a consideration, we would have clearly done so. But given the distance we were, moving 1, 2, I mean, literally the new barn is built at the back of the old barn. I can be honest and say we didn't consider that any further.
But you didn't check beforehand? You didn't perform any kind of biodiversity or wildlife checks before you destroyed it?
Sorry, I should just clarify, there weren't any bats or owls or anything in that area. And I can't say any more than that, really.
Councillor Harvey.
First point is, why is this retrospective? Obviously, you have a planning agent with you, but the context is, why are we now seeing this as a retrospective application? In the context of a retrospective application, you have an objector who's come along tonight and spoke about the implications for their property, particularly in regard to power. What do you intend to do now that you have built this thing without permission originally? to resolve the obvious issues that your neighbour is suffering from because of the construction that you've undertaken?
Councillor Harvey, I can answer that. The power outage has nothing to do with the development. Yes, I do. If you want to check with SSB, we've been woken at midnight and at 2 in the morning to put a generator into our field because that's where the substation is, because the power's gone out in Hackwood Lane, and we've had to do that on 2 occasions at quite some inconvenience to ourselves. But we've done so because it not only powers, he's not our immediate neighbour. There's 2 houses in between and a house to the side, so we've done all of that. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's our mistake. No 2 ways about it. We knocked one down, put one up. It was smaller, put it in the same location. Well, actually, not quite the same as at the back of where it was. We thought it was really appropriate for the site, and didn't give it any more consideration than that. So that is our mistake.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much. That's you, yeah. Questions to officers? No? Debate? Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. All 3 borough councillors in this ward have been to have a look at the site. I have to say I do have some sympathy with the objector, but I cannot see any legitimate planning objection. So on that basis, I don't feel able to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor McCormick.
Thank you. To be honest with you, I think it's appalling that it's retrospective in the first place. They haven't taken due care and diligence with the old building to ensure wildlife protection. They've just decided to knock one thing down, stick up another thing, and they might say it's smaller, but it's not. All they've done is squashed it inwards, so the footprint might be smaller, but it's a lot taller, and an extra 2 metres on the ridge height is quite a bit of distance. I'd be a bit miffed if they stuck that, if they replaced something like that anywhere near me. It does seem to be that they haven't given a monkeys basically what's going to be upset. They wanted a new barn, so they put one in, and now they're having to come through because someone said, "Hang on a minute." I'm not comfortable with it at all. I think that it's appalling. And I think personally, I think it's way too tall, and it shouldn't have been retrospective in the first place.
Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have some reservations about the fact that it's been basically put up without any application, and we're being asked to approve it after the event. Questions raised about bats and things like that. Like Councillor Godison, I can't see any reason to refuse it. So, with a degree of reluctance, I will move the recommendation.
Councillor Tomlin.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Hussey.
Just an observation about the negligence in the original construction of this replacement barn. In addition to the wildlife, they did mention the old one had an asbestos roof, which needs special treatment if you're going to demolish that. And we don't know how it was demolished, what experts, no information whatsoever. I'm just appalled at the negligence.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm at that 9. Mike makes it 9. And those against? 1. And 1 abstention. 2 abstentions. Thank you. That is approved. Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. To confirm, that application was recommended for approval subject to the conditions and informatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6, I did intend to say at the beginning that has been withdrawn. So fortunately, it doesn't look like there's anybody waiting to listen to it. Item number 7, 3 Polecat Cottages, Polecat Corner, Tunworth. Nicola.
The application concerns a single-storey rear extension onto the property. There's nothing to report or within an update, and the recommendation is for approval.
Thank you. There are no speakers, so questions to officers. Okay, no questions to officers. Debate. Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. I know the site well. The local parish council are very concerned about the fact that the site on the other side of the road has been grossly overdeveloped. That, of course, is completely irrelevant as far as this particular application is concerned. As far as this particular application is concerned, I can see no reason to oppose it whatsoever, and I'm happy to move it. Thank you.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Harvey. Thank you. Anybody wish to comment? Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you. That paper item which Nicola will introduce.
The back paper concerns the removal of a legal agreement that's been attached to an old 1990 consent, which was attached to the erection of staff accommodation for the property called Whitehill House. So of relevance, as you can see within the planning history, there's a recent approval back in July last year for a lawful development certificate for the said building, for the continued use of the building as an independent dwelling. So given this planning history and the granting of the lawful development certificate, so the legal agreement that was originally attached is no longer serves a purpose. So that's why the recommendation for the removal of the legal agreement is before you today.
Thank you, Nicola. Anybody wish to question the officers? No. Debate? No. In that case, I'll move it from the chair. Seconded by Councillor Harvey. Those in favour? That's everybody. I want to go home. Thank you very much, everybody. That's everything. And thank you very much to the officers for all their hard work. And we'll see you soon. Thank you. Good night.